gentlemen, boys and girls, addicts of all ages, welcome to Canadian Sober, eh? I'm your host, Dougie Fresh, Doug Matthews, whatever you want to call me. Wherever you are today, I'm glad you're joining us today. I heard a quote a while ago, and the quote was, "Great things are often born out of dire circumstances." And I can tell you that our guest today is a great individual. He's an author. He does speaking engagements. He goes to universities and talks to the kids. And he does a lot for the recovery community. But I'm going to let him talk more about that, and I'm going to shut up. So let me introduce Bo. How you doing today, Bo?
Man, I'm doing great, Doug. It's been a while since I've seen you, so I appreciate you thinking of me and having me on.
I'm so glad you're here today. Can you tell the listening audience that have no idea who you are, because you're not a Simcoe County Ontarioan, so why don't you tell them who you are, and let's get to know you a little better.
Yeah, you bet. I'm not an Ontarioan, but I did live in Aurora, Newmarket area for about a year back in 1989 when they were building the Sky Dome, as a matter of fact. But so my name is Bo Payne. I live in Idaho. I'm a U.S. citizen, but I spent a lot of time in Vancouver, BC, and a little bit in Toronto growing up, ages 5 to 15. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I live one day at a time is how I do it. One moment at a time sometimes. My professional career is I'm a public national speaker. I've authored a book. I'm currently working on my second book. My first book is called Pain to Purpose, and my last name is Payne, so it's kind of how I found purpose through a lot of my pain. I'm an ex-Major League Baseball draft pick by the Florida Marlins. I'm a U.S. Army infantry soldier, or ex-veteran, or veteran. And also, guys, I spent over 10 and a half years in jails and prisons, mostly of that in prisons and state penitentiaries for the alcohol-related, drug-related offenses. So since I got out of my last prison term years ago, it was about 3.5 years I did, I've completely turned my life around. I found purpose and intent in my life. I just have had so many people believe in me through a lot of tough times in my life. So I just feel it's just incredibly incumbent upon me to extend that help to other people who have helped me, and not just people who have helped me, people I don't know. Doug and I, we're active in the online sobriety community, and I'm also active in my own community, in real time. So helping other alcoholics achieve sobriety is really my main thing in life. I just love it. I love it.
So can you tell us a little bit about your story? Like, what happened when you were younger? Like, how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I'm going to condense this a little bit. I was born in Jackson, Tennessee, just outside of Memphis, and I was born into an incredibly violent household. My father is a Vietnam vet, suffers horribly from PTSD, but he's a very violent man. I haven't seen him in almost 20 years. He is alive. Both my parents are alive. My family, sister, mom, nieces, nephews, they all live in Boulder, Colorado. And so I'll give you just a couple incidents, Doug, of kind of what happened growing up in my household. So I was 4 years old, and my mom was pregnant with my baby sister. And we're all in the delivery room, or I'm out in the hospital, whatever. And this is what I was heard. I wasn't there presently, but I was told after by my mom that my dad up and left and said, I'm right when my mom's about to deliver my sister. He said, I'm out of here. And my mom said, why? He said, because I've seen babies in Vietnam squat down and put out babies in the rice paddies. And he just left. And he left our entire family, moved to Dallas, Texas that day. And my mom had just delivered my baby sister. So my mom's with me, 4-year-old, a brand new child. And we're in Memphis. My mom was trying to, finish a degree. And it was just tough. So they eventually reconciled, and we moved up to Vancouver, British Columbia. My father was a stockbroker at the Vancouver Stock Exchange. He got a job doing that. My parents are really well educated. They both have higher education, postgraduate degrees. I have a GED from a state penitentiary. So I have lousy education, but a lot of street smarts and a lot of practical, literal stuff that I've gone through. So the norm for me, Doug, was just violence. I was a great athlete, growing up. I was usually the best on my, playing in Canada, learned how to skate, loved playing hockey, soccer, basketball, baseball, football. My dad was the coach of a lot of teams, and it was just difficult. I understand fathers wanting their sons to excel, especially if they have, a certain amount of athletic ability. And I'm just going to tell you a couple stories about, what happened with me and my father, and the kind of pressure that I was under. The bottom line, the bottom common denominator of this whole story in my life is fear. Just fear, just paralyzed in fear my entire life. Not now. I've been recovering for a long time and I feel great. So I'm playing basketball. It's probably sixth grade. So I guess, yeah, grade 6 at Maplewood Elementary School in Vancouver. And I'm a real good ball player back then. I'm scoring a lot of points, and we're in a tournament and it's halftime. And I've just, Doug, you're a basketball fan, and I'm just shooting bricks, man. I'm like 1 for 15, and I was practicing spin moves and all stuff that I'd seen, guys like Magic Johnson, and trying to shoot like Larry Bird, and just stuff like that. And I had a horrible first half. And my father, his thing was always, you embarrass me in front of all these people. You're a joke. You're such an embarrassment, and he'd spit on me and kick me and all this stuff. And so he grabs me, takes me across the street to the old dingy bathroom across the street in a Chevron station. It's dark in there. He gets the keys because you got to go in these nasty old bathrooms. I don't even know if gas stations have them anymore, but and instantly slaps me right in the face and cuts my lip, and I'm bleeding a little bit. And he's like, how could you embarrass me in front of all these people? How could you do this? And I'm just like, what? I don't know. I'm just paralyzed. So he kicks open a stall door and he throws me in a stall, grabs my hair. I had a lot of hair back then, by the way. And he proceeds to flush the toilet and dunk my head over and over and over into the toilet. And he says, are you going to embarrass me again? And he rips it up. And I'm trying to beg, but I'm choking on water. I think I'm going to die. There's feces in the toilet. There's everything else in the toilet. It was an awful situation. I had blue urinal cake all over my uniform. And so he goes back to the second half, cuts the little blood off my mouth and wipes me off. Obviously, you can tell something happened to me. But my father was very smooth. And people were either enamored with him, scared with him, or they took the stance of, he's me, he's not my child, out of sight, out of mind. Obviously, people knew what was going on. When stuff came out later years, that's all the violent abuse that I went through with my father. He would kick me out of the car on the way back from places like Maple Ridge, BC, going into Vancouver, and throw me in a ditch, kick me, spit on me, tell me I was terrible because I went 4 for 5 at a baseball game, 2 home runs, 2 doubles, but I struck out the last at bat. And so I caught just holy crap for that last at bat. Again, you embarrassed me. How could you strike out? And I'm thinking I just went 4 for 5 with 2 jacks, 2 doubles, and about 6 ribbies, and that's a pretty good game, And so, anyways, that's I don't want to tell more stories like that, but that's what led me to be so fearful of coming home. And then my parents divorced again. They reconciled and divorced again when I was about 12, and I turned to drugs and alcohol for relief. When I first got drunk, guys, I felt like all my problems just washed away, completely washed away. And I felt like I had arrived. I felt confident. I felt better looking. I felt like I fit in. I felt like my jokes were funnier. I felt like I could talk to girls, and I couldn't do any of these things if I wasn't inebriated, because I was just so stuck in fear mode, and I did that, Doug, for a long time. I compared my insides, how terrible I felt intrinsically, to other people's outsides. And I never felt like I fit in anywhere, ever. People always thought I did because I was, a high school guy and on the, just whatever, just athlete. But I was dying inside most of my life, scared to death of my own shadow. I was never comfortable in my own skin. It just, it was an awful thing. So I'm just really glad. I'll tell you another story. So I moved on. I got drafted by the Florida Marlins playing baseball. Had some really tough abuse in my teenage years, all sorts, mental, physical, emotional, a lot of sexual abuse too. No sexual abuse in my house, but outside. And it just really shaped who I became later in life. Just scared to death. And so I was always on, doing drugs or drinking, trying to just escape, fill that void that I hated about myself. So went along, I started getting into criminal stuff. I ended up in prison the first time back in the 2000s. I did about 2 years on that one and ended up going to prison 2 more times. And I've done about 10 and a half years incarcerated in the United States in various penitentiaries. And it's difficult. It's tough living. The worst thing for me is just knowing and sitting with myself and knowing that all the chaos that I had caused, when I first started going to prison, guys, I would blame everybody else. I was always a blamer. You would do what my life, if you had my life, you would drink and use my life. Oh, it's your fault that you did this. Last time I went to prison, Doug, I got a 10-year sentence and I had to do 42 months of it before I was eligible for parole. And I did 42 months of it and it was fantastic. And so that's where I changed my attitude. I was in my early 40s, I'll be 51 this year. And I said, man, I don't belong here anymore. I don't belong in prison. I don't have a criminal mind. I've got a serious alcohol problem, drug problem, but I've got to take responsibility for everything in my life. So I started taking responsibility for the stuff that I blamed other people for. Even if it wasn't my fault, I just stopped blaming people. I said, no more victimhood whatsoever. People can be victimized, but if we continue to live in victimhood, it's just going to keep us down. And so when I stopped living in victimhood, I was able to start getting clean and sober, start helping other men in the program. It started in prison. I started attending, recovery meetings, chapel, anything I could do to get involved. And I carried it out to, what we call the free world. And I've just gone since then, years. And it just my thing that I live by three things, and it's gratitude, solution, and service. Service, I have got to be of help to other people. I've got to get out of my own head, because left to my own devices between this prison that I speak about sometimes when I get speaking engagements, I say, I've done a lot of prison time, but the worst prison I've ever been incarcerated in is the one between these 2 ears. Hating myself, comparing myself to other people, thinking I don't fit in. I felt like, the United States has Hawaii out here, and then the rest of the mainland. I felt like I was Hawaii and I never fit in like a piece of a puzzle. And I always felt like I was a round, or a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. And I just drank and drank and drank and drugged to fill that insecurity. And I was arrogant. But underneath it all, man, I was dying. So my life started to change immensely when I got out my last prison term. It's fantastic, dude. I just can't explain to you. Anybody who's going to listen to this, don't give up until that miracle happens. Like you talked about that quote. That quote's been mine for probably 5 years. Great things are often born out of dire circumstances. So don't give up until the miracle happens. Doug, you're a miracle. I'm a miracle. Anybody who's sober one day at a time, who's an alcoholic and has addiction problems, are miracles, because we know that this nasty, disgusting disease, or whatever you want to call it, it has tentacles that reach everywhere. So anyways, I got tired of hurting my family, my friends, my children, and I decided to get sober, and I love it, man. It's the greatest thing ever for me.
That's so great, Bo. Like I don't know, like I've been following you now for a little while, and like we've never met in person. I hope we're able to meet in person one day.
Yes.
And like you're so inspirational for me. Like I always say, like when COVID hit, and there was all of these like online meetings popping up, you know what I mean? And then everybody started, like, at least where I live, they don't really recover out loud. And I started noticing all these people in America that were recovering out loud. And I was like, well, what's this all about? Right.
Yeah,
and I think that's where I came across your account. I go to your account sometimes and just to browse, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I go there to look for inspiration. Right. Like, because I find you very inspiring.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about, like, where did you get the idea and what was the process of writing a book?
It kind of fell into my lap because my last name is Payne. And then I hadn't even really thought of the book before I thought of Pain to Purpose, because when I was last in prison and then years in the free world, when I got out, I started to think that, I started to live with purpose, and intention. Every day I would set my intention. And, and have a great routine and what I want to do and how I want to be purposeful in my intention. And then I thought, wow, I have found a wonderful life that has been born out of all the pain in my life. And so I just said, man, that's, and I know a lot of guys, ex-athletes, and stuff like that. And the publishing company I'm with, I know those guys. And I said, Pain to Purpose, man, like, because I live my life out of purpose. And it just fell into my lap. And I wrote the book. It goes dark. There's some serious dark stuff in the book, but ultimately at the end, I wrote it as seasons. Summer, fall, winter, spring. I'm a baseball player, and always, just just gave hope. In the winter, I talked about a lot of dark seasons in prison and my life, and just rounded it out to the end of the book. I hope anybody who reads it gets immense inspiration out of it, because anybody can get better. They just have to believe in themselves.
Do you think your life would have been better today if obviously without drugs or alcohol, but with the money that maybe you would have made in your career and all of that kind of stuff? Or do you think that maybe all of that stuff would have led you to a trail of destruction and everything, because we are addicts, right?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't regret any of it. And a lot of people say, how can you not regret it? The only regrets that I have is the people that I hurt, the relationships lost with my children, which I've gained them back in tenfold since I've become sober. But no, I don't regret it. I think, I was a projected first round pick coming out of high school, and I got kicked out of high school and lost I was a national prospect. I was a, all-state, Florida baseball player, had big billing, magazines, all that, not covers, but, just write-ups and stuff on big baseball magazines. And I didn't make it. I was drunk all the time, and I had no chance. So what I would tell guys actually that are young athletes, stay away from that stuff, because we think growing up, because we're good athletes, that we're going to have everything handed to us. Like when you're in grade school, you're the best. When you're getting to high school, generally you're the best. If you go to college, you're probably one of the best. And if you're fortunate enough to get drafted and go to the pros, you're definitely not the best. So you have to understand, wherever you go, there's going to be somebody better than you. That's just the way it is. Unless you're Michael Jordan or Barry Bonds or, Mike Trout or whatever. But so I just would encourage young men and women to stick close to their parents, stick close to, their teachers, their coaches, and understand that their life can change in the blink of an eye if they start running down that wrong road to alcohol and drugs. It's just not worth it. It is. I love my life today, but guys, I have been through some hardships, and that's why I say pain to purpose. I'm not playing victim about those hardships, but I like to tell people about it because it can happen to anybody: black, white, green, gay, straight, man, woman. I mean, addiction does not discriminate. Rich, poor, socioeconomic status, man, it will get you if you go down there. And I don't want to see, and that's my biggest leadership platform today, is helping, mostly men that I work with, but some women not to travel the same roads I traveled. People don't need to get that hurt. But I'm fortunate because I've turned my pain into purpose. So
that's fantastic. What a great message for the younger kids out there. So you heard it from Bo Payne. Become a homebody. Don't stay with mom and dad. Don't go out there with your friends. If your friends say, hey, we're going to go to a party, no, I'm going to stay home. And just think about the future you could have without drugs or alcohol. Bo, you mentioned one thing, I think before we started the show tonight, was the stigma of addiction and the stigma of people in recovery and everything like that. And, when I was, before I came to recovery, you hear that story of somebody living under a bridge with a brown paper bag, who's homeless, right? So do you think the stigma is getting any better out there for recovering addicts?
I think it's gotten far greater or far better than it used to be. I think because there's people like you mentioned, Doug, recovering out loud, that they used to say, and I attend, 12-step meetings, and it's anonymous. So I usually don't talk about that, in my reels or my posts on Instagram and stuff like that. But I think the stigma is dissipating. I think that, the American Medical Association designated alcoholism as a disease, I believe, in 1955 or something like that. I don't know what, I'm not here to debate whether it is or not, but I'm just saying that I think people have come a long way. The Department of Correction in the United States, the judges, everything, they're not so inclined to throw your butt in prison for a small bag of meth or something like that. I'm not advocating getting a small bag of meth or anything, but I'm saying that treatment is what we need. We don't need to throw drug addicts in prison for many years. There's tons of drugs in prison anyway, so they're just going to use them in there. We need to get them into rehab, and we need to get them, the stigma's broken, and we need to get them the resources where they can succeed after that 28-day inpatient or whatever they do. Because a lot of people go to these 28-day inpatients, it's kind of a spin dry, get clean, get sober, feel good, but don't have the tools to succeed once they leave. So, but yeah, I think the stigma everywhere from people talking about it. Recovering out loud, you do it, I do it. Many of us do it. Doug and I know, you and I know many of the same people who do it, who've gone through some tough paths. And for me, when I speak and I tell my story at length, the real deep stuff, I always have a guy or two come up to me after and say, man, I can't believe you went through that. I went the same stuff. I went through it too, man. And I'm so proud of you for saying of talking about it, because I look like a normal guy. There's nothing, I'm not just off the street. I don't think I fit the under the bridge drinking, lighting a fire, trying to stay warm, but that was me for years. You know what I mean? So it can get anybody. So yeah, but I'm proud of the DOC, Department of Correction, everybody, but Canada, United States, UK. I really believe that the stigma is becoming less and less and less, and it's because of people like you who speak out loud about it too.
Yeah, our guest who we had on last week, Jess, she made a comment to me later on, and she said, I live in a small town 2 hours north of Toronto. And, when I started doing it, I was like one of the only people in the town that was doing it. So I had a lot of long-term sobriety people that were always like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not good. It was the typical thing. And, I would talk to my sponsor. I would talk to my wife. I would say, what do you think or whatever? And they would be like, as long as you don't involve that one program that you and I know about, as long as you keep them out of the press, radio, and films, do what you want to do, right? Like if you want to recover out loud, recover out loud. So I really just stuck to my gut and just kept pushing forward. And now I'm starting to see more and more people within this town that are saying, like, you know what? I am an addict. I'm recovering, and life is pretty damn good today. So why should I be embarrassed about getting help for that? I think that's a huge thing with men. Joe Tilley talked about that in the first episode, that it's okay as a man to ask for help.
Yes.
We can ask for help today,
That's huge. That's huge.
One thing I wanted to ask you, and I'm kind of I'm interested to learn what comes out of your mouth, is like when you were in prison, when you were in jail, you don't really have to explain like everything about it, but like, did they have things for people in recovery in prison?
They do. It depends on what penitentiary you're at. There's minimum custody, medium, and maximum custody. Usually I was medium custody or maximum custody, which they lock you down a lot more. But the times that I was in medium custody or so, or even minimum a couple times, AA meetings, we get to go to chapel. There's Christian services, Muslim services, Jewish services, Mormon services. I mean, just not. And so a lot of us, myself, and that's when I really got into a philosophy of Stoicism and Taoism is what I started really enjoying when I was in prison. And I would go to AA and share my stories with younger guys that are coming, because I was older than most of the guys going into prison. They're usually, young guys, full of vinegar and whatever, and don't, they feel untouchable. But then they look at me and I say, man, this guy's in his early 40s and he's back in prison for the third time. I say, listen, guys, dog, this can happen to you. If you don't believe it, this can happen to you. So don't do what you're doing and stop it. And I would tell my story, and I helped a lot of guys. Wow. I think I do. I've been told, they've texted me and DM'd me and said, thank you so much for your help. But prison is difficult because you miss your family, you miss your friends. You're told what to do all the time, this and that, but you pay the piper, I guess, when you commit crimes. So
yeah, and you're kind of isolated, and like you said at the beginning, right? Like that prison in here.
Oh yeah.
You start thinking you have more time in here than you do to do anything else, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. Bo, if you could, one last thing here before we go, if you can talk to a young Bo. Maybe somebody's listening right now, like I said earlier, a young athlete or a young Bo, what advice would you give them today?
I would tell my child version of myself, or even somebody like myself that went through a lot of this pain, talk to somebody, because I did not reach out to anybody. What my medicine, Doug, was for all the abuse and especially the sexual abuse. It made me, it twisted my mind, and it made me question my sexuality. It made me, just all, and I'm a straight male, and but it made me question things. Is that I've got to talk to people. I've got to reach out to counselors. I've got to talk to my mother. Just you can't keep it inside, and you can't. If any young guys listen to me, you can't treat this depression or insecurity or the way you feel about yourself inside with drugs and alcohol. It doesn't work. Drugs and alcohol are the big lie. They're the giant lie. So reach out, talk to somebody, know that you're good enough, believe in yourself, and keep going and stay away from that poison. It's just, you have to, and reach out to a trusted adult.
Yeah. I always laugh when I see those commercials on TV, like in the summertime, and everybody's by the poolside having a good time and stuff like that. And then I'm like, what happens later on? when
I know.
Show me.
You cut now here. Yeah, they never showed that. Yeah, 5 hours later, they never show people getting dragged away in handcuffs and. Oh, it's awful, man. I am so glad to be clean and sober today. I know you are too. It's just so many opportunities are open up, when we get clean and sober. And so, yeah.
Well, listen, Bo, I'm so stoked that you were able to make it today and come on Canadian Sober and share a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And you're going in the right direction. Yeah. You got some recovery time now under you, and you're doing great things within the recovery community. So if you want to give a little plug right now for your book, and maybe if anybody wants to reach out on Instagram or Facebook, maybe you can say that too.
What I'd like to plug is I have some online sober coaching programs that are going to be up and going in about 3 days. So I'm really excited about helping men get physically fit and getting them sober. So my website is bopayne.com, and my IG, my Insta is SoberBo Official. And then you can find me on Facebook, I believe at bo.payne /942 is my URL. But just look up Bo Payne and you can find me on there. Shoot me a DM. I always respond to my DMs when I get a chance. And my book is on Amazon, Pain to Purpose. And that's about it. Yeah. So I'm really excited about this coaching. I love helping people. So I'm excited about it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bo, for coming on today. I'm so blessed that you're in my life, and we're gonna hook up one day.
Likewise, Doug. Likewise. Thank you all for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us at Canadian Sober. We'll see you next week for another great guest. Have a great night, Simcoe County. Talk to you guys later.